teach. But what I teach are the classics, from Lord of the Rings to Enid Blyton, I've just seen in your notes, to Jane
Austen.
Austen, thank you very much.
Emma's just about to come out.
J.R.R. Tolkien was a massive influence of mine. C.S. Lewis, you know, all of these. I can't not mention the writer of Harry Potter. I'm not doing well with names today.
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling, thank you. Yes. The names are just falling out of my head. But,
how could you? You're such a Harry Potter fan.
I'm such a Harry Potter fan.
So you just go blank.
But do you know what? Part of the reason I am a fan is because there was a time, and I've been teaching long enough to see the change, that girls I found have a natural affinity with the written word, with the imagination. Maybe because Allah instilled in girls this level of empathy that's perhaps slightly higher than that of boys, because we have different biological needs. You know, girls grow up in general to be mothers, so you need that level of empathy, you need that level of understanding, whereas boys
I suppose there are different qualities.
There's different qualities, and this is but at a biological level. Yeah. I've just found that girls have more affinity with the written word. Yeah. Yes, this is not me blanketing children or.
That's such an important. Sorry to interrupt, but you know, in the Quran there is about the emotion of Hazrat Musa alayhi salam's mother, and the fact that there was emotion in there, and I just want to interject on that point. Motherhood and the emotion, it's in there in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually recognised the human emotion, and when that gets evoked, that's how people change.
Right, and I'm coming to that. Right. So that's absolutely right, sis. You're now when J.K. Rowling came along, I literally, if I could have jumped into her world and given her a big hug, because all of a sudden my boys couldn't put books down. And it started off with Harry Potter, then it went on to football stories, then it went on to one of my favourite books is Blah, the Boy Who Didn't Want to Save the World. And all of a sudden, it was kind of like a hook. And from that, teaching boys to read became so much easier. But look, I want to go back to our Islamic roots. Stories transcend time. They're infinite. And this is how the hadith survived, because the Arabs had an amazing memory, but their written word was weak. So they story told. And that's how, because the word Arab comes from el-Arab, which is dry, waste, very destitute. And that's how the word Arab came about, because they were a tough people. They had to survive, you know, opening their tents to nothing. So in order to survive, not only did they have to strive in terms of surviving physically in food and water, but they had to survive mentally. And so stories became a real thing. So the hadith came from the root ahadith. And it is literally meant to tell a happening, to report, to give news, to speak of. That's where the root hadith came from.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that, because that's really good.
And later on, as the discussion carries on, sis, going back to what you said about deriving emotions, there's TED Talks on presentations, like one after another. And they talk about the science of delivering a good presentation, but the science of delivering a good presentation is actually the science of delivering a good story. And as a teacher,
I completely agree, because a lot of the TED Talks, what I've noticed, doesn't matter what professional comes on. I don't know if they must get some sort of a guidelines to be able to do that, because not everyone's from that particular background. But the way that it is told, it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end, and it's done in a very storytelling fashion, and it's very impactful. Which is why, first of all, I'm going to turn to our viewers. This is a live show. If you have a story to tell, are you a storyteller? How does storytelling impact you? Has it impacted your life? Are you who you are today because of the stories that you heard or grew up with? Or tips and comments on how to get our children into storytelling and how to be inspired by it. Do feel free to call in. Our number is on your screen. That was a lot of questions.
There was a lot of questions, a lot of direction in questions, but alhamdulillah, it's really so. As a teacher, I did this naturally, but then for the show, I did a bit more research. And one of the things my children look forward to is story time at the end of the day. Story time. And I actually taught maths through story. And I taught arithmetic through story. I would make up a story about the 0. I would make up a story about -1 for them to understand what negative numbers were. And it could be as simple as there was a stick man called -1, and poor thing felt down in the dumps because he was less. and they would all laugh. And, you know, and I would come up. But that's because you are creating high levels of dopamine, which means you build suspense, cliffhanger, and create relativity. You've got to interject oxytocin, which is the bond of empathy and generosity, and then you've got to flood them with endorphins, which is laughter. Then you can create, that you allow them to create in their imagination and picture what you're trying to deliver. So though at a scientific level, it is literally dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins.
That makes me feel really good about my storytelling, because the feedback that I've had is, like, for example, one that I did was called My Beautiful Best Friend. It set the scene very quickly of childhood, 2 little children playing, but mine are always metaphors, so basically it's never really, so kindness comes to join the 2 little girls, and in the end the whole thing has got a finale, a climax. You never really, the beautiful best friend is not really your beautiful best friend, it's your good deeds.
So on that note, Seema, what purpose does storytelling serve? Is there a tool that we can utilize to teach values and principles? Is this what the objective is with your storytelling?
That's exactly what I'm behind. My storytelling, everything is one little hadith or some kind of moral behind it, but it's done in a fashion which is entertaining, informative, draws the reader in. As you said, that oxytocin first sets the scene, draws something that they're familiar with. Childhood, everybody had a childhood, so draws the reader in. A little bit of mystery, what could it be about? Is it metaphor? So I don't really give away what the story's going to be about. And then the message, underneath the message. So a lot of my stories have a lot of layers. Some are just entertaining, you'll finally get the message. The next have got tiny little hadiths and knowledge and quotes in it. And people who are well versed in the Quran will see, oh, that's, you know, from the Quran.
But even people who are not well versed,
because it's got all layers basically of the story, so it entertains. It's got the backdrop of the nasheed at the back or the piano music, so it's got everything drawing you in with the emotion.
Right. So I don't know if anyone's seen the film Inception, but Inception is basically how they go 4 levels down to plant a seed of an idea in the subconscious of this host, and that's exactly what storytelling does, because because you're using those 4 hormones, you're having a real effect on the brain, and deep down inside you're creating a neurological pathway that's embedded, especially if you are a consistent storyteller with the right message embedded in there, which is why in America they banned subliminal messaging for the sale of popcorn in cinemas, because the popcorn sales went through the roof, and they deemed it illegal because you're influencing a human being to the point where they're bypassing their thoughts, you know, their conscious thought. So, but the Prophet ﷺ narrated this story to his companions, not as mere entertainment, but as is said in the Quran. So he narrated a story, and then Allah revealed the verse. It's verse 11, 120. We tell you the stories of the messengers that we may make firm your heart. Stories in the Hadith and the Quran serve as examples, encouraging us in faith and connecting us to our fellow believers in eras beyond our own.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because people don't. It doesn't often click, but the Quran itself is a lot of
story.
A lot of the chapters are stories. So we get our guidelines, our laws, whether it's to do with the justice system, or it's our rights towards our parents, our rights towards the society, to the ummah. Allah tells us not only through poetry form, which is another key way, but He's telling us so many stories of the past messengers and what they have gone through, and gives us lessons through it for our life.
Which is why tadabbur and tafakkur are so important.
That's why I want to talk about my most favourite story in the Quran that I used to read to my younger sisters. So I used to get the English Quran out in Ramzan time and read to my younger sisters, and they used to just love listening to the story of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam. the Quran has got a story in there it's got drama, it's got sibling rivalry, it's got Zulaikha coming after him, it's got everything, it's got passion, it's got power, it's got everything that a story could possibly have, and everything. I mean, it is the most detailed story in the Quran, that story of Hazrat Yusuf.
How important is it that we get this element, this method of teaching, especially our children and people, especially when it comes to Islam, that we bring the storytelling back, that we take from this?
We bring it to life by telling people that it's okay to listen to all forms of media, because I think Islam has sometimes been a little bit behind because it won't enter film format. I find it very difficult in my storytelling because we've got to be very careful that we do not picturize any prophet or give a face or a visualization to something. So I find it very difficult to, and I'm using metaphors, nature, inanimate objects to get my point across. And we need to be able to tell the story to Muslims with a sense of haya and shyness and understanding of the modesty, but we must get the point across.
That it be done within the boundaries of Islam.
Yes, that's exactly it.
At the end of the day, if you're trying to teach Islam, you've got to do it within the boundaries
of Islam. It's possible, and that's exactly what
people are doing it.
That I'm facing. We're doing it.
But we'll come back to that more, but we're going to quickly go off for a break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM. Now, the power of storytelling. What impact has it in your life? How has it inspired you in all that you do? How do we instill the love for storytelling in our children? All of that and more. Now, if you have any questions or comments, would like to take part in the discussion, the number is on your screen. Do feel free to call in and tell us a really interesting story. Now then, just coming back to the discussion, ladies, so far we've gone into how we can utilize storytelling, for the fact that it is a tool to teach and tell stories and principles, but also how powerful is storytelling to create. We did touch on empathy, but Saleena, storytelling is another. There's so many methods of storytelling. Number one, so documentaries could be a method of storytelling. We have so much access to modern technology now through Instagram and YouTube, and every day people have access to be able to tell that storytelling. So much is happening around the world. How can we use that? Can we use that to bring to life the suffering of what people are going through in other parts of the world and create awareness and knowledge and empathy for humanity?
So first of all, not only should we, it's not a question of should, we should, absolutely. Empathy for me is probably the number one emotion that I seek to develop in my children. When I studied Brené Brown, who's a very famous author, she spent her whole life studying guilt and shame. And she came to the conclusion after almost 20 years research that as a people, as a nation, as a world, we are lacking in empathy, vulnerability. Because when you're vulnerable, and you were saying before the show that it took you a while to go in front of the camera, to become that storyteller, because you were afraid to be vulnerable. But then once you showed up, you actually touched so many lives. And so in order for Seema to develop that sense of strength and to withstand the vulnerability, she had to develop your sense of empathy overpowered that.
That's so true, because my love for humanity overcome everything that I was afraid of, camera shyness, everything that spoke. But I wanted to get a message to humanity. I love, what is it that makes you human? And it is that vulnerability that makes you human.
People would assume that that's your bravery coming through, but actually it all stems from your deep level of empathy for humanity. Then that led to your recognition of that you had to be vulnerable. Then your bravery came through so that you could bypass your fears, so that you could bring your gift to the world. And that's why Brené Brown says that in order for empathy in order for us to move on as a nation, as a humankind, empathy and vulnerability should be our two number one set levels of emotion that we need to develop. But how do you do that? You do that through storytelling. And one of her TED Talks that went viral is because she told her story on a TED Talk. And she literally went to bed, and then the next day her phone had blown up because the TED Talk, because she told a story of her vulnerability, her battle with shame and guilt. And anyone I know to be successful, like, for example, one of the great trainers of multi-level marketing is a man named Eric Worre. And I had the pleasure of studying with him for a bit. And he said, facts tell, but stories sell. And there was another research project done on a cheap piece of, a cheap ornament, like a horse head. Now, this gentleman bought 100 horse heads off of eBay for 99 cents. He then contacted his favorite authors that were among his friends, and he said, everyone write me a story about this horse head. They all wrote the story about this horse head. He chose his favorite one, put the horse head back on eBay, but this time for $65, right? So that's a $6,000, that's a 6,000% markup, and he sold 8,000 of them. He was selling hardly any with the 99 cents, but he sold 8,000 of them with a story for $65.
Also,
what does that tell you?
The old lady in me is coming out. I do watch a lot of antique programs. I actually grew up watching it with my dad. It's something that I do with my dad.
My dad
he watches those ones.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we notice is the antiques that sell more are the ones that have a story with it. They preserve the story.
Yes.
I think we as human beings love a story.
Well, Ertugrul.
We love stories.
Why
because,
is Ertugrul so successful?
Yeah, because it's actually, we all have a story waiting to be told, and it's evolving minute by minute, day by day. That's
Absolutely.
our story.
But just to bring Ertugrul into that, the Turkish drama series, it's gone worldwide. And
Muslim and non-Muslim alike.
Muslims and non-Muslim watching.
Yeah.
And one of the lessons to take away from that is that as Muslims, we need to bring forth our heroes, our prophets, our heroines, particularly for the younger generation that we are completely losing.
Yeah,
especially for girls.
When I listen to, lectures of Islam, and I translate them into my stories with all of my knowledge. When I wrote My Trench Coat, which was my marriage and my love for my husband, I actually put myself out there, which was my personal story, but it all had how Allah puts love and mercy between your hearts. What is marriage for Islam? Because people are very negative about how Muslim women are shown within marriage, within the roles, and I want to put a positive message out there, and people loved it. They were like, this is real life. This is someone who's actually putting a part of themselves out there, and every single has a bit of me in it, so it's got a bit of my...
Do you ever worry how people will receive it?
Not really, to be honest, because it's very early days, and because I am so passionate and I've got that kind of heart, basically, which wants to show positivity. If someone does say something negative, I think I've overcome that frailty now.
Because you're so secure in your mission.
That Allah's guided me to do this, and because I'm doing it as a form of dawah for Islam, actually, that is my main goal, to spread the message and the morality of Islam.
And do you know what? I'll go back to Brené Brown. She said, there was one, they told her not to read the comments, and she read the comments, and similar to you, it really did affect her at first, but then after some time, she said, do you know what? If you're going to criticize me, but criticize me from the shadows, I'm not interested in your feedback. If you're going to show up and be vulnerable and then critique what I'm doing, 100% I'm all ears. But
I read Brené Brown's book, actually, and
she's amazing, isn't she?
And it's funny, she's really amazing because she's actually talking about a topic that I recently did called Missing, about haya and shame, and actually that is the guiding characteristic of her faith, but she's talking about it in a different level, the way we shame our children, the way we make them feel bad about themselves.
Please don't shame your children,
so
to discipline them.
I did a recent one which was all about haya, it's about the defining characteristics of it, and showing haya in a positive light. It's not about submissiveness, it's not about being downtrodden, it is about having a sense of self-worth in yourself as a human being. It's actually the opposite of that. And the other thing that I really wanted to talk about was when I listened to some of the alims, when they talk about Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he used to do a khutbah every Friday, and he used to mainly do Surah Qaf, right? It's got 4 stories within Surah Qaf, and Sahaba Ikram used to be in tears. They used to be crying every Friday, and I used to wonder and understand, why is it that, people go to khutbah now, they come out, that's it, they're back on their phones.
It's time to go work.
Time to go to work, back to your haram, maybe karobar, maybe back to your, maybe your haram relationship, maybe something that you're in your life that is not fitting in with your life. And what made hearts change? What was it about Muhammad Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's storytelling, he evoked the emotion in people with such a passion. But it's the same story he was telling every single time.
But the tree cried
every single time. How did he do it?
The tree
he did it by
well.
emotion. Emotion.
Do you remember? Again, did you read the? So when he changed the place he would do the khutbah, the tree started crying, and some of the Sahabas heard the tree weeping because of the storytelling and the emotion.
So how much of that do we now need to take then in terms of preserving our history and telling our history? And there are actually pretty good YouTube channels, programs out there, and on other social media. There's one particular that sticks with me, and this person he narrates the story of Bilal radiallahu anhu and his love for Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's such a small little thing. It's not even a long few minutes, but every time I hear it, it brings the tears out in me. So, and then there's clips that talk about the conversations between Allah and the angels about His slave, and there's so much love and compassion in that, and the way that the story
those things
is told.
move me when I listen to those things.
But that's the point. Point is, it moves us into loving Islam. It shows us what Islam is. But along the way, somehow lost that, and the way Islam has been taught in madrasas and the way we've been taught Islam, there's been no love in it. There's been no story in it. There's no.
And I think I remember my mum telling us
know what to say.
My mum telling us stories when we were younger, and she would tell it in her lovely Urdu voice in Ramzan, reading from the Quran, telling us, your hands will speak, in Qiyamatin. It was like inanimate objects. What would happen? The pen has written.
But even the Day of Judgment, even on certain rules and values, things that we find difficult, if those things were brought forward in the way that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, maybe we would be quicker and stronger in the way that we embrace those things. But I have to say, I don't want to be negative, because there are a lot of madrasas and mosques and speakers that are coming out now and telling it in such a powerful storytelling manner that it is having a positive impact on people. So we're getting there, but we do need to do more.
We shouldn't be negative, but what we should do is that we should recognise that the forms of media that are available now, the song format, the lyrical format, the entertaining format, and the short soundbite. My stories are about 7 minutes long. I've researched how long a person's attention can stay on something. When will that message? I need to get that message through before the viewer gets bored. You have to do it in such a way. You draw the reader in, get the message done, and it's got to reach them through emotion. And the way to do that is to build that bridge between the storyteller. This quote I love: stories build bridges. When the story ends and the teller's voice is silenced, the bridge between the teller and the listener remains.
So that bridge, on that point about the listener, what role does the listener play in the storytelling?
The listener, oh my goodness, the listener is the one that is wanting their heart to be changed but doesn't know how, doesn't know where to go, has got that little bit of loss, just needs that little push, that little quote, that little bit of emotion, something that's going to push them to want to change. And that's where the story comes in, and that's where the listener comes in. The listener has got their heart open. Even if it's a little bit, tiny little chink of your heart is open to change, open to receive the story, and that's when the story goes in and changes.
Saleena, how important is it for the story? We don't have long to go now, but how important is it for the storyteller to tell the truth when they're telling the story?
Well, you have to be careful with the truth, because you don't want to put the truth can be blunt. The truth can be beautiful, or it can be blunt.
But this is where the storytelling skills come in, right?
Right, so I'm going to tell you a very brief story. We're at the table, and my children, I made a particular dinner that they really like. They like their roast, and both my children turned around and said, "Oh, Mum, I'm really full." And I took that as an opportunity, so I said, "Do you know what? Let's go make a sujood, because the Prophet, for his whole life, never experienced a full stomach. So you're experiencing something that the Prophet didn't experience." And so we all made sujood, but it was a short story, and I didn't want them to feel bad. I said, "I'm not telling you this to feel bad, but this is how much Allah loves you. The person that was most beloved to Allah didn't experience something that Allah's gifting to you right now. So let's go and make a sujood, and let's hold hands, and let's give thanks for the food on our plate. Let's give thanks for the farmers that farmed the potatoes, that grew, that looked after the lamb, and even down to the person who grew the mint that we're enjoying in our mint sauce." So there are so many ways to deliver truth. Truth is important, because I told them the truth, but I did it in a way that kind of awoke them. And so truth is important, but you have to make it in a way that evokes the correct emotions. Don't evoke shame, or so for example,
don't leave the listener depressed.
Don't leave the listener. So I, even though I shocked them with the fact that the Prophet never had a full stomach, but I gave them the gift of saying, but Allah loves you so much that He's giving you something He never gave to
I think
the
what you
Prophet.
left them with is the feeling of gratitude.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. But the guys, sadly, as always, the time flies. Just a very quickly, final message, Seema.
The final message is based actually in that there's nothing but the truth. There has to be the truth out there, and the truth needs to be told in a beautiful manner that evokes positivity. And all of my stories that I put out there are always about the highs and lows, light and dark, of the human nature, which is basically in a state of what we call the self-reproaching soul. It doesn't like bad. It doesn't like to feel bad. And the only way to do that is evoke that emotion, bring the good out in yourself and feel the positivity. So every single story of mine ends, sometimes with death, but it's a positive message. You have the opportunity to change. You still have time. You can change your life around. You can get that.
I can give you 10 seconds.
Yeah, very quickly. So, like everyone who puts their hijab on, it's a cloak. Everyone who doesn't put their hijab on and just wears a cloak, that was the last thing the Prophet needed to get rid of before he died. And so, every time you put on something, a coat, praise him, because that's one of his last stories.
MashaAllah, subhanAllah.
On that note, Jazakallah khair, ladies. Very beautifully told. Thank you so much. And also to you, the viewers, I hope this has been a good discussion for you. Now, if you have any stories that you want to tell, you can always email it to us on womensam@islamchannel.tv. Until next time, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.